I knew that homosexual behavior was a sin. I knew it was wrong. I was like 14, 15 years old, going to gay bars, going to nightclubs, going to all these things. I just thought this was kind of a phase I'm going through, and it turns out it wasn't. And then it became my identity. I just had this overwhelming sense of emptiness. I was like, is that all there is to a fire? Is that all there is? And I just felt completely empty, and I was in a panic about my future. I'm like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life?
Many people are forgetting that they have the power of Jesus Christ, not only in their lives, but working in and through them. I mean, Jesus Christ has the power to change lives.
In the middle of my bedroom, I said, God, you have my whole life. I'm done. I'm yours.
What was the reaction of your friends? Did you tell them immediately? Did you come out as a Christian? Welcome to another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton, and it is my pleasure to have with me on the show today Mr. Beckett Cook, who is the host of the appropriately named Beckett Cook Show. Beckett, how are you doing?
Good to be here, Larry.
How are things in Los Angeles today?
LA's crazy. I was having coffee the other day right across the street, and there was a police chase suddenly out of nowhere, and a car, like the car they were chasing, ran into the meter right in front of where I was sitting. And the meter like bent over, and then all the cops like surrounded the car. And I mean, it's wild. It's wild out here. It's the Wild West.
You're probably the only person who wasn't videoing it. Probably everybody else had their phone up and everyone else was videoing it. You know, I think we're the same generation. Are we close to the same age?
I think we
You're
are.
A little younger than me, I'm sure. But
no, I think we might be the same age, actually. I think. Okay,
I'm 56. How old are you, Beckett?
56.
That's amazing, because I interviewed somebody a couple of days ago, Jason Whitlock, and he's 56. So 56 rocks. I mean, that's
a good year.
That's the age.
I mean, the 80s were a great decade. The 80s were like the perfect decade to come of age in. I loved it.
Really, that is true, and I feel sorry for. 90s weren't bad. My boys grew up, did at least when they were very small in the, in the 90s and early 2000s. They had some really wonderful years there. But I will say the 80s, Gen X, we really had it good, didn't we? I mean, I would go outside and play. My mom would generally have no idea really where I was. But she would open the door like a lot of moms did. Did your mom do this? And say, supper time. Her voice would resonate around the neighborhood. And if I didn't hear it, a friend or somebody would say, hey, your mom's called you. It's time for dinner. And you'd go home. And we ride our bicycles all over the neighborhood. And these days, I'm afraid to let any children I'm responsible for out of my sight.
I know. Well, I mean, when I was in high school, I went to Acapulco for the weekend with my friends, and my parents had no idea because I was I'm the youngest of 8 kids, and so they were so checked out. And when I got home, my mother was in the kitchen, and I was like, "Hi, Mom," and she's like, "Hi, Beck." And like, she didn't even notice that I was gone for 3 days. So that's how
that is typical. That is a Gen X story. That is absolutely a story that is typical of Gen X. It's 100%. But, it's so funny you talk about being the youngest of 8 children. My daughter, Sasha, who I'd love for you to meet sometime. Sasha is the subject of a book that I have up here to my left, The Grace Effect. It's hard to imagine that Sasha is not my biological daughter. I mean, somehow in my mind, I've manufactured memories of holding her, as a child, but that actually never really happened. We didn't adopt Sasha until she was almost 11. And Sasha is a remarkable young woman. And she has, a baby girl, Abby Kate, as I like to call her. And it's so funny because Sasha is the picture, of the helicopter mom at this stage. I mean, because this is her first child. And I keep saying to her, and she thinks I sound like a horrible human being when I say this, but I say, Sasha, it's okay if she cries. It is okay if she cries. I mean, you want to make sure that, she's not sick or there's not something actually wrong. But children already at this age, they learn to manipulate you. And you don't need to respond to every time she cries. And that hasn't made a dent in her thinking whatsoever. But I keep telling her, as you and Dalton, my son-in-law, is her husband, obviously, have more children, you're going to become more casual. You're going to get where you go, baby's crying, ah.
Yeah, for sure.
And by the time it got to number 8,
my parents
your kids will be taking trips to Acapulco and nobody will be paying attention.
They had no idea where I was half the time.
Did you grow up in California?
No, I grew up in Dallas, Texas.
Okay. And you moved to Los Angeles for career reasons, I suppose.
Yeah, I moved to LA in 1993, June of 1993, and so I've been here. What does that make it? 2022. Is that 20 years or 30 years? That was 30 years ago. So, I moved here unfortunately because I was going to go to law school. I was enrolled, and which I mean, I would have regretted that probably too. But I moved to LA to pursue writing and acting, and had some success in both fields, especially the acting. I did a ton of commercials, like national commercials.
Did you really?
Yeah. But then that kind of petered out, and I had two kind of big writing projects that sold but then never got made, and so that's when I switched to production design. I fell into production design because my friend was the West Coast editor for the New York Times magazine, and so I started working with her on photo shoots with movies with celebrities and models, and so that's what I did for 20 years after dabbling in, acting and writing for a while.
Well, let's jump into your story, and I want to hear your story for several reasons, but not the least of which is this. As you and I were talking via text, something that I keep seeing among conservatives is kind of a defeatist mentality. I mean, it's over, the globalists have won, the culture is lost, America is over. I mean, it's just Eeyore, on and on and on. And it intrigues me because I'm hearing that from, not just people who are, conservative in some sense, but are people who are Christians. And it's like many people are forgetting that they have the power of Jesus Christ, not only in their lives, but working in and through them and millions of others, both in this culture and others. But talking and more specifically at a smaller level, at the individual level, I mean, Jesus Christ has the power to change lives, and he's had a massive impact in changing my life and in changing yours.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, when I was really young in Dallas, I mean, first of all, when I was 9 years old, I was molested by. No one should spend the night at friends' houses ever. I spent the night at a friend's house from my school, and in the middle of the night, I woke up to his father molesting me, which was like bizarre.
Oh wow.
And that had a big impact on me, obviously. And so, because I thought my first reaction or response was I thought he was going to kill me if he knew I was awake. So that kind of put me on this trajectory. And I developed same-sex attraction. It wasn't something that I wanted, obviously, because in the 80s or whatever or actually that was in the 70s. It was, taboo no one wanted to be gay. So that, I didn't want that. But over the years, it just started to just be increase in its intensity, the same sex attraction. And then in high school, that's when kind of the floodgates opened. And I went to a Jesuit school in Dallas. And I met, when I was a junior, I met a sophomore who was dealing with, I mean, we didn't say it to each other at first, but we could tell. It's like you can kind of tell that someone else is dealing with the same sex attraction. And we became best friends. And we started, once that happened, and then we came out to each other like a few months later. And once we did that, we started going to gay bars and in Dallas. I mean, again, I was like 14, 15 years old, going to gay bars, going to nightclubs, going to all these things.
Wow. At that age.
Yeah. Again, my parents were just completely checked out. And I would come home at 5 a.m. and like, you know, on school nights. But I was making straight A's in school. So my dad just never really noticed or cared that much because, you know, I was doing well in school. So, and then, so that was a big deal in high school to have someone who was dealing with the same thing and who I had I had a confidant and we talked about everything. And we really just, you know, it was crazy. You know, we explored everything. And then the same thing in college. I ended up becoming best friends with someone who was same-sex attracted. And so I had a confidant because I still wasn't out to anyone except a few people. And I thought that this same-sex attraction would go away eventually, and I would marry a woman and have a family. Like, I just thought this is kind of a phase I'm going through, and turns out it wasn't. And then it became my identity. After college, I moved to Tokyo and with my best friend, and we lived there. Well, I lived there for a year. He lived there for 5 years. For I don't know why, but while we were in Japan, his friend came to visit us from Texas. His friend from Texas, and we'll just call him Adam. Adam came to visit us in our tiny Tokyo apartment, and by the end of his stay, we had fallen in love, and that was the first time I had felt that. It's the first time I had experienced that kind of emotion, like strong emotion. And we got into a relationship. And that's when I just was like, okay, this is definitely who I am. This is immutable. And I came out to everyone, my family, friends. I was happy. I mean, I was happy to be gay. I was thrilled. And so,
what year are we talking about here?
This is
roughly
1991, 92, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. 91.
So you're say 24, 25. Okay.
I think I was, yeah, maybe 23, I think, or 24. So my parents, you know, their reaction was brilliant. All of my siblings are Christians, and my parents are in heaven right now. My parents are Christian. We're Christians, very strong Christians. But their reaction was, again, it was partly because I was, you know, the youngest of 8, but they were just so loving and you know, obviously they disagreed with it and they believed it was a sin, but they just were like, we love you. And my dad asked me, you know, is there anything I did as a father that you're angry about? Did I, you know, and he listed a few things and I'm like, no, Dad, it's not your fault. This is just who I am. And my mother she cried when she found out. And, because she was terrified. Well, she cried for several reasons. But one of the main reasons was AIDS was a death sentence back in that time. And she was terrified of that. I was terrified of that. I mean, but I tried to allay her fears and I just said, Mom, it's not a big deal. Don't worry about me. And I kind of just tried to communicate to her that, you know, I'm not promiscuous. Like, don't worry. And That was the last time we spoke of it.
There's peace of mind and security. Security for our country, security for our leaders, and security for our families. But think about this. You're not financially secure if all your eggs are in one basket. Gold and silver are an excellent way to diversify your savings. They're a hedge against inflation. They're a physical asset that is in high demand globally, from the wealthy to central banks. And through my friends at Birch Gold Group, you can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account. That's right, you can diversify an old IRA or 401k for no money out of pocket into an IRA in gold and silver. This is one thing you can do to secure your family's savings. Text IDEAS to 989898 and receive a free, no-obligation Infokit and learn the role precious metals play in your overall savings strategy. Again, text IDEAS to 989898. With an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of happy customers, you can trust Birch Gold like I do. Text IDEAS to 989898. As we go through life, the years bring us wisdom, experience, and memories we hold dear. Yet with age, our health often faces new challenges. It's a natural part of life, but it's crucial to address these changes with the right care and attention. For me, one of the ways to stay sharp is to supplement. I've been using Liver Health Formula, and I recommend you try it for yourself to see the results that it can bring. And right now, I think is the time to start taking care of your liver, because there is a silent epidemic affecting 100 million Americans. 1 in 3 Americans suffer from an overworked and sluggish liver. It affects our weight, energy levels, clear thinking and productivity, and even sleep. Our livers get bombed every day with GMOs, microplastics, toxins, and all of the stuff that you might not even know about. Liver Health Formula can support your liver to minimize the impacts of all of this. It is a premium supplement designed with 11 clinically proven botanicals to support and detoxify your liver, helping you feel revitalized and ready to conquer each day. Just listen to Mr. Harrington's testimonial, who shared his transformative journey. At first, I was skeptical, but the health improvement has been nothing but amazing. The tired, foggy feeling I've had is gone. I have more energy for a longer duration. Also, the service and delivery is always prompt. Of course, results are not typical, thus you have to see for yourself. There's an exclusive deal for my audience. Head to getliverhelp.com/Larry. And as a special offer, you'll get a free 1-month supply of nano-powered omega-3s with your order. That's getliverhelp.com/Larry.
When I moved to LA, we had a great relationship, and I talked to my parents all the time, and they never once, after that first conversation, they never once quoted Bible verses to me or sent me, they never said, "Oh, Beckett, you're still sinning, right?" And because they knew that it was a spiritual battle. And my mother, I recently found a letter that my mother wrote to God. My sister-in-law found it in a box and sent it to me, and I read this letter. It's called A Prayer for Becket, and it's 24 prayer points. And when I saw this letter, I started bawling, because I didn't know my mother was praying for me so strongly and so specifically for all those years. And the first point, I wish I had the letter with me right now, but the first point of the prayer is, here it is, was, let's see if I can pull this up here. Why is Google Chrome not working? Yeah. The first point is, deal aggressively with the enemy, come against him in the all-powerful name of the Lord Jesus Christ, and with the sword of the Spirit, the word of God. So my mother and my father, I assume, just instinctively knew that this was not something they could convince me out of or talk me out of. They had to go to the throne room of God, and they prayed. and all my siblings prayed too. Anyway, I moved out to California, and I, loved when I got here. I was just embraced by my friends in LA, and I had a really fun group of friends, just like super smart, super funny, super talented. They all were in show business. They were producers, actors, directors, writers, and they're all extremely successful now. And you've seen many movies by these people, and so I I loved my group of friends. There were gay people in it, there were straight people. It was a total mix of people, and so we all wanted the same things in life. None of us believed in God. We didn't even talk about God ever. It was just assumed God didn't exist. These were like kids from Brown University and from Princeton, and so it was just assumed. We didn't even have to discuss it. And so, but we wanted three things in life. We wanted to make it in Hollywood, which they all did, like, wildly. And then we wanted to find true love, which we were everyone was like always looking for, their boyfriend or girlfriend. And I cycled through 5 serious boyfriends in LA. And each relationship lasted 2 years, roughly 2 years, which is kind of the shelf life of a gay relationship. And then it breaks up or it becomes like an open thing. And then the last thing we wanted was to have extraordinary experiences. And because all of my friends were in the business, we were always invited to, award shows. We were invited to movie premieres every week, every Thursday night. And, the Oscars, the Emmys, the Golden Globes, the Grammys, and all the after parties, the Vanity Fair party, the HBO party. So I was always going to these events and meeting everyone, and I basically met everyone in Hollywood, and was friends with a lot of people here. And so that was, and I am one night, this in terms of extraordinary experiences, one night I was invited to Prince's house, and he performed a concert in his backyard for 3 hours. And these kinds of things were just like constantly happening where, my friends, 2 of my closest friends became movie star or TV star. Mariska Hargitay she was Jane Mansfield's daughter, but she wasn't really, she had done some acting on like Seinfeld, a couple shows, but she didn't have a big career yet. And I drove her to her audition or she drove and I sat in the passenger seat and ran lines with her for her audition for Law and Order Special Victims Unit. And she got the part. And she's still doing the show, which is crazy. For like 23 years later, she's still on that show. But Minnie Driver was another a dear friend, and she had done one movie with like Chris O'Donnell. It's called Circle of Friends, and it was like a flop. But then she did Good Will Hunting with Matt Damon and became this huge movie star overnight. So this was like happening to all my friends, and it was crazy to watch. And my friend Doug Lyman directed Swingers, that movie Swingers, and then he did all the Bourne Identity stuff. But so I was just kind of like in this world of shiny objects. I was having a great time, and until I wasn't. It lasted for like, I don't know, what's 1993 to 2009. That's how long this lasted, and of course I wanted to know the meaning of life. I wanted to know what the purpose, like where I came from, what I'm doing here, where I'm going. But God was never an option for me because I was gay. So I thought, okay, well, that's off the table. So I've got to figure out how to find meaning somewhere else. And I would go to the theater in New York and London all the time. And I would go to serious plays by Harold Pinter, Tom Stoppard, Eugene O'Neill, Tony Kushner, who wrote Angels in America, which is a 6-hour gay Fantasia play. And I saw the first 3 hours in London and the second 3 on Broadway. But so I would go thinking, okay, these guys they're so smart and they'll have some sort of insight into the meaning of life. So, but I would always leave frustrated because there was never an answer. So, and then the other thing that kind of kept me afloat was the art world, because I was obsessed with art. And every time I was in New York or London or Paris, I mean, I was at a museum at least one museum every day. And art was kind of like my religion. And I was just especially into contemporary art. And so, I mean, I was at the Centre Pompidou in Paris, and this is just an example of what I loved. Is Yves Klein had an exhibition there, and it was just like 3 or 4 empty galleries in the museum that were adjacent, and it was just hardwood floors and white walls. That was the art exhibition. And I just thought, this is brilliant. Like, this negative space. So that's kind of what you sort of, that's what I lived for. And then I had this experience in March of 2009. I was in Paris at Paris Fashion Week. I used to go to the fashion weeks, and I went to a bunch of the show. I went to a bunch of the runway shows, and most of them have after parties. And I was at this after party at this club called Regine in the middle of Paris. It's a very famous club. The owner actually just died recently. And I was there, and Kanye West was there. All the fashion world was there, and I had this moment of, I was drinking champagne, everyone was dancing, and I just had this overwhelming sense of emptiness. I was like, is that all there is to a fire? Is that all there is? And I just felt completely empty, and I was in a panic about my future. I'm like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? Like, all these kind of shiny objects have sustained me for this long, since high school. I mean, because this has been going on since high school, but this isn't working anymore. So what am I going to do? And so I went back to the apartment I had rented in the Marais, and I was up all night in a panic about my life. And I just was like, this is crazy. And so I got back to LA, kind of got super busy with work again. And production is takes over your life. So you just you can't think about anything else. So I was just immersed in work. Cut to 6 months later, I was with my best friend, and we were at a coffee shop in Silver Lake, which is on the east side of LA. And Silver Lake, I mean, LA is progressive, but Silver Lake is especially very progressive. And so we were there. We used to hang out there every weekend, this coffee shop called Intelligentsia. And that particular Sunday we were there, and we were chatting, and we looked over, and there was a group of young people with Bibles on the table. There were 5 Bibles on this table. And I had never seen a Bible in public in LA, it was crazy to see this, especially in Silver Lake. So my friend and I looked and my friend was gay too. And so we looked at each other and we're like, what is going on? And my friend liked to engage. He kind of liked to stir the pot. And so he urged me to turn to them and talk to them. And I was like, no, I don't want to talk to them. Eventually I did. I turned and I said, are you guys Christians? What's the deal? And they said yes. And they told me they went to an evangelical church in Hollywood called Reality LA. And so we talked for like an hour. And I said, what do you guys believe? Because I mean, I don't really remember. Just tell me what you believe. Which is, by the way, it's like a Christian's fantasy come true when a gay atheist is like,
yes,
tell me about your Christianity.
This sounds like a scene out of, something like God's Not Dead, or something.
Totally. And so they told me what they believed, and I said, of course,
it sounds so contrived. I mean,
I know.
It sounds like it just couldn't have actually happened. I'm sorry. Go
only
ahead.
Only God. So of course, I got to the question, the $64,000 question, and I said, "What does your church believe about homosexuality?" And they said, "Well, we believe it's a sin." I mean, this was like these were young kids, like these were like 23, 24-year-old kids, and this was in 2009. And I doubt that if I asked that same question today to a group of people like that from a Christian church, I doubt they would say it so bluntly. But they were just very clear about it and said, we believe it's a sin. And the interesting thing about that is I thought, I wasn't surprised by their answer. I was surprised by my reaction because, a few years, 5 years, 10 years before that, I would have said to them, okay, you guys are crazy and thank you. It was nice meeting you, but I'm going back to my table. But because of that night in Paris 6 months before, I was open to hearing something new. And so they invited me to their church. I said, I don't know if I'll come, but just give me the address and I'll think about it. So I had a whole week to think about this. And it was kind of a risky thing to do because if any of my friends, other than the guy I was with, if they had found out that I was going to an evangelical church, they would have thought I'd lost my mind. Because evangelicals were the enemy, according to
of course, the butt of every Hollywood joke.
Oh yeah, they were the enemy. So they were somewhere to the right of Attila the Hun. So we. And by the way, I was a total, Ariana. I used to hang out at Ariana Huffington's house. I had been there a few times for cocktail parties, and that was my kind of world, like my politically speaking. That just the LA kind of lefties, and so yeah, it was kind of nerve-wracking to think of my friends finding out about this. But the following Sunday rolled around and I woke up and I thought, you know what, let me just see what this is all about. And I got ready, went to it meets in a high school auditorium in Hollywood. And I didn't know what to expect at all. I was just, so I walk in and the Christian band is playing, the worship music is playing. And I just kind of was like, oh, I forgot Christian music. I forgot that existed. And I kind of cringed a little bit. But then I thought, no, this is actually nice. And I sat down by myself on the fourth row on the aisle. And this is an auditorium that seats 1,000 people. So it was pretty big. And the pastor comes out and he starts preaching on Romans chapter 7. And as he's preaching, strange things start to happen to me. Every word that he says, every sentence that he's saying is resonating as truth in my mind and my heart. And I don't know why. And I'm just literally on the edge of my seat, riveted to the sermon. And I'm like, just keep talking. And his sermons are an hour long. And even after an hour, I didn't want him to stop. I just was like, what are you saying? And it was the first time in my life that I had truly heard and understood the gospel. And then after the sermon, he said, there's people on the side of the auditorium. If you want prayer for anything, you can get prayed for. And so I went up to this guy. I went up to the stranger and I said, hey, I don't know what I believe, but I'm here. And he prayed for me. And it was just this powerful moment of like, why does this random straight dude care about me so much? And so, I thanked him for the prayer. I went back to my seat and I sat down and there was another 25 minutes of worship music and everyone else was standing and singing. I sat down because I was just too freaked out by everything, by the sermon, by the prayer, by the music. I sat, and as soon as I sat down, I don't even know how to explain it really, but it was just like the Holy Spirit, God revealed himself to me in a kind of a road to Damascus moment. The Holy Spirit just went, and God, it was like Isaiah when he's in the temple and he sees the holiness of God and comes undone. I just started bawling, and God, in my mind, it was so clear. God said, I'm God, Jesus is my son, heaven is real, hell is real, welcome to my kingdom. And I was doubled over bawling for the next 25 minutes. And I couldn't believe, and I was crying over two things. Number one, finally knowing the meaning of life and knowing the truth. And I was like, Jesus, this is real. I was just so blown away. I'm like, I can't believe this is true, that God is real and Jesus is real. This is all true. But I was also crying over the conviction of sin. And it was the most kind of cathartic cry I've ever had in my life. It was amazing. And then I get home after the service and it happens again. I get into my bed and to take a nap because I'm just so, exhausted from the whole thing. And God's like, let me show you some more of my glory or presence. And I just was like, whoa. And I burst into tears, jumped out of my bed, and in the middle of my bedroom, I said, God, you have my whole life. I'm done. I'm yours. That's it. And I knew in that moment, I knew that homosexual behavior was a sin. I knew it was wrong. I knew that it wasn't my identity. I knew that dating guys was not a part of my future, but I didn't care because I had just met Jesus. And I'm like, I'm going with Jesus. Forget those guys. And that was September 20th, 2009. And I've never looked back.
Wow. Beckett, that is so powerful. Several things come to mind. I just felt a chill as you're telling me that, and you're talking about your being touched by the Lord in such a powerful way, both during the sermon and after it. I just praise God for you. I praise God for his work in your life, in my life, and the lives of billions of others. It reminded me of something I read fairly recently. I'm sure the name Chris Christopherson is has some meaning to you. The famous actor and songwriter, musician. But recently I was and for whatever reason, I've heard the song a million times, Beckett, but for some reason this time I was really listening to the lyrics, and I decided to look up the lyrics. Who wrote this? And it was, Lord Help Me Jesus. You remember this song? Lord Help Me Jesus, I've wasted it, so help me Jesus.
No, I've never heard that.
Oh, it's a powerful song. I've heard it it's country song, but it's a very iconic. Loads of cover versions of the song. But I look it up, and lo and behold, it was written by Chris Christopherson. And he was talking about being at it's very powerful. And he said that he was at a fundraiser with some of his other friends, and they were all singing, and performing for some kind of charity benefit. And he said a woman who was there, I think a fellow musician who was a Christian, invited him, and this was in Texas, invited him to go with her the next day to her church. And he decided he would go, though somewhat reluctantly and with all kinds of preconceived notions and so on. And he says, from the moment this guy started preaching, he says, it started touching me. And he said, and here I am, a man whose life was full of addictions. He said, he joked, he was a Rhodes Scholar. And he said, I should say that my life and Bill Clinton's should put to rest any notion that Rhodes Scholars are brilliant. And
exactly.
Anyway, he said there's an altar call, and the next thing I know, I get up and I'm going forward. And he said, I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing? what am I doing? And he gets down front and he kneels and he says, I don't even know why I'm here. And he said, but the next thing he knows, he's receiving Christ into his life. It sounded so similar to what you're talking about, the power of the Holy Spirit, the power of God's word when spoken. It's as sharp as a two-edged sword, and its impact upon your life is just amazing. What was the reaction of your friends? Did you tell them immediately, or did you kind of stay undercover for a little while?
No.
Did you come out as a Christian?
I had to come out as a Christian. Yeah, that was well, first, it took me a few days just to calm down. I couldn't even
just to process what had happened.
To process it, and so the first thing I did was I emailed one of my siblings first, and then I eventually emailed
a Christian.
Yeah, they're all Christians, and
okay,
I emailed my brother Damien, and I told him, I said, because it's interesting because Damien was kind of the most judgmental about me in my life. And he was the first person I reached out to tell, because I was so excited to tell him that, basically like you were right. And so my siblings were just, my parents, they were all just, crying. They called me crying and they couldn't believe it. And then I slowly told my friends, and it took a few weeks. I would kind of meet with each person one at a time, and I would tell them. And this one friend of mine, Anna, she lived in LA. We were writing partners for a while. And then she moved to New York, but she came back to LA for a visit, and she came over to my apartment and she said, hey, well, what's going on with your life? Like, tell me everything. And it was right after I got saved. And I was like, well, I have something really crazy to tell you. I mean, she and I were super close. And I was like, she's like, well, what, are you moving? Did you buy a house? Like, have you met a guy? And I'm like, well, actually, I did meet a guy. His name is Jesus. And so my friend's reaction, with a couple of exceptions, it was kind of like, I'm happy for you. I'm happy you found your path kind of thing. Although a couple of friends, when I told them, especially about the gay part, they became very hostile, and but then they were fine later. But so yeah, I for a while I tried to, I tried to hang on to those friendships as long as I could, but it was becoming more and more difficult because I had a new set of, Christian friends whom I would spend every evening at a prayer meeting, at a Bible study, at this or that, or church. So I was always busy with my new friends. And so it was hard to keep in contact with my old friends. And when I would go to these dinner parties with my old friends, just the conversations, I couldn't even, I was like, all I want to talk about is God. And you guys are just talking about other people and gossiping, basically. Like I can't, it was all like horizontal conversation. I just wanted vertical conversation. So that's, I kind of sort of, I still am in contact with those old friends a little bit, but I don't see them. I very rarely see them. So but God gave me a whole new group of people.
Do you think, Beckett, sometimes I have encountered this, say, when I'm sharing the gospel with, let's say, a Muslim. This isn't typically the case, say, for instance, here in the South, where many unbelievers are moving within, somewhat Christian, circles, if you know what I mean. And they might not be a believer, but a lot of their friends are going to church and they've kind of grown up with a certain kind of Christian ethos, perhaps the way you did in Texas. But I find that when I am sharing the gospel with somebody who, let's say their lifestyle is completely, inconsistent with the Christian life, or again, you're talking about somebody who is, let's say, a Muslim, that I have on occasion reached a place in sharing my faith with someone where they intellectually will agree with you. They've gone from 0 to 60 insofar as that they're prepared to say, okay, I didn't believe that Jesus was real and that the Bible is true and that he's the only way, and wasn't sure what I thought of all these ideas. But now I've reached a place where I do believe that. However, the barrier to faith, I find for people in those circumstances, is the realization, you can see the wheels turning, that, oh my goodness, the implications of this for my life, it's too painful. I will have to tell unbelievers. I probably won't have a relationship. They will ostracize me. I won't have a relationship. It means a complete, not because Christ demands that they change, all their friends, but kind of the way you just described it. It just happens. It just happens that by becoming a Christian, suddenly now their lifestyle just doesn't fit with those people that they were hanging with before. And that the realization of that can be incredibly threatening. And thus, in some instances, they will cling to their unbelief for emotional reasons, not intellectual ones, but emotional reasons. Does this resonate with you at all?
Yeah, but I mean,
you are prepared to go that way, but can you relate to that?
Yeah. Because I mean, it is, as I said, for me, it was risky, if my friends found out, and because I would lose my card in the West Hollywood or whatever. But for me, I mean, it was like, because it was such a powerful encounter. And by the way, I thought, my friends, these people I've been friends with for some, up to 20 years, if not more. And they are so close to me. We're such good friends. Like, I'm going to tell them what happened to me and they're going to become Christians like that. I thought that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, these people trust me. They know me through and through. And it wasn't the case. I was shocked at how it kind of fell on deaf ears. And one of my best friends, or two of my best friends, actually, a guy who was a roommate for a long time, his first reaction was, when I told him the whole story, he said, "Beckett, I'm happy for you. Don't ever proselytize me." And I was like, whoa, like, you don't want to know about what it's like to know God? Like, you don't want to know it was so surprising to me. And then another friend, we were roommates as well for a while. We were like Will and Grace. We were the original Will and Grace. And I told her, and the first thing she said to me was, "You're not pro-life now, are you?" And I was like, "What? Like, that's your first question?"
Interesting. That is an interesting first question.
I'm like, don't you want to know what it's like to know Jesus? Like, it's, anyway, so, and when my book came out in 2019, and that's kind of when, before 2019, my friends, we were still kind of connected, but after 2019, that's kind of when, especially those two very close friends, they just cut me off when my book came out, because they were in. And so a lot of friends after the book, because it's one thing to talk about it and to, but it's another thing to have a book out in the world about this issue. And when my friends when they found that out, they, most of them kind of cut me off, basically. And
well, let's say something about that book. A change of affection A Gay Man's Incredible Story of Redemption. That's the title of your book. Presumably, people can find that at Amazon, fine bookstores everywhere. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you faced any? I mean, as I think about this, Beckett, as you're talking, it seems to me that, I mean, evangelical Christians, it's open season on evangelical Christians, but if there are people that maybe receive more hostility than, just your, basic run of the mill evangelical Christian, it is Black evangelical Christian, conservatives, and it is people who have left the homosexual lifestyle, turned on the LGBTQ mafia, as I call them, the alphabet mafia, which they are, and are reviled. I mean, they receive such incredible hostility. I mean, for you, which took more courage, telling your parents that you had decided that you were a gay man, or telling your friends years later that you had received Christ into your life? I mean, both of those require some kind of measure of courage, I should say.
They do. Actually, with my parents, they had already, my sister told them, so I didn't have to tell them.
Okay.
So that was already done when I got home from Tokyo. But yeah, I mean, I think it was, I don't know. They were both difficult. They were both difficult to do. I mean, although I guess coming out as a Christian was more difficult because of the culture we live in now, and the hostility and all that goes with it. Yeah. So it was, but for me, again, it was like that road to Damascus, powerful encounter with God. I didn't care who knew. I was just like, this is, I mean,
clearly not. I mean, it defines your life. Pardon me for 1 second, but you had said earlier, and I really appreciate you saying this, because I find in my limited interaction with the LGBTQ crowd, but it is what defines them. Their sexuality is what defines them. I know of no one else except maybe, somebody who has just thrown themselves, into, I don't know, strip bars and, whatever else, that their sexuality defines them. It may be very important to them, but it doesn't define them. Mm-hmm. But now you have made your Christian faith define you, and you've been willing to count the cost. And I would say that in Dallas, Texas, the typical guy, again, unless we're talking about somebody who's Hindu or Muslim or, entrenched in the alternative lifestyle community there probably isn't much cost for a conversion and belief in Jesus Christ. Not in Birmingham, Alabama, or Charlotte, North Carolina, but in Hollywood. I mean, in Hollywood, I should imagine that the cost for you has been considerable. And I do note that you're talking about these relationships, for the most part, in past tense.
Yeah, and also I forgot to mention this. When my book came out in 2019, 3 weeks after it came out, so I had, these major agents who represented me for production design. 3 weeks after my book came out, I got an email, and I had done huge shoots I was working all the time basically and making them a ton of money. But as soon as the book came out, one of them sent me an email, and it was the craziest email. It was like, hey Beckett, such and such, so and so person left the agency, and I've taken over her clients, and I know you're focused on your book right now, and I think it's best we part professional ways. I'm like, what?
Wow.
And so I lost
that. That's not surprising at all.
But I wasn't, the cool thing was I wasn't upset or angry. I just emailed him back and I said, thank you so much for everything. And because in 2014, it was the strong call. God called me to seminary. and I went to Talbot at Biola, and so I knew that God was eventually going to pull me into a different direction and to a different vocation. I just didn't know when exactly, and so when that happened with my agent, when they dropped me, I was just like, okay, cool. Like God's going to open another door, and He did. So so I wasn't angry or upset about it.
Oh, well, I mean, you would have by that time have developed some toughness in dealing with these kind of issues. That would have been your first time out and receiving a backlash. And again, I admire you. I admire your courage. I love your story because it's such a powerful story, such a real story. And it maybe sounds like an odd thing, Beckett, but I can't help but think that in those moments where you feel the Lord speaking so powerfully to you through His Word and through through this preaching, I was wondering how many other people who were raised in the church and are members there, maybe lifelong members there, are sitting there looking at their phones and half asleep. I mean, while you're there having your life changed, how many other people are just not even really aware that something marvelous is happening in the lives of people who are letting the Lord's word, just penetrate them, like the gamma rays of an X-ray. I mean, I don't know. It's just a thought that ran through my head because I think sometimes those people who are raised in the church, maybe they don't have, quote unquote, what we might consider to be big sins per se. It's just that they take it all for granted. And maybe the hard thing for them to overcome is a sense of self-righteousness and a kind of cultural Christianity that's just become, what do I want to say, habit for them. It's not actually life transforming. It's just kind of the way I live. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it was different for me because my church, being a Christian in Hollywood isn't very popular. So
no, I guess not. This is true. You're right. This was not in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah,
this was not in Dallas, Texas. I forgot.
So this
was not in South Lake.
Yeah, exactly. South Lake, Texas. So yeah, but what was cool is the people at my church, when they found out about my conversion, they were so supportive of me and rallied around me, and
that's fantastic.
Invited me. It was just crazy. Like there were so many people. I would get text messages from strangers at my church saying, "Praying for you today." And I'm like, wow. So it was pretty amazing how they were so supportive and loving to me.
Okay, changing gears just a little bit, how do you react to, I just asked Jason Whitlock this because he's pretty, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he's a sports writer. He's with the Blaze. He has his own podcast, and he was with ESPN forever. And he was telling me how, he for years was hanging out with, the Kobe Bryants and Charles Barkleys and all these kinds of people, and the kind of lifestyle that they were engaging in, which at that time that he's talking about was generally, a very promiscuous kind of lifestyle, and that has served, he speculates, as a kind of control on those people, so that you have an individual who, let's say, isn't very political, and certainly not to the left, but because he wants the money, and because the power brokers have, shall we say, a dossier on that person and their lifestyle, they can maintain a certain measure of control of them. What do you make of the news that we're seeing now with Sean Diddy Combs and the allegations that seem like they're all over the place? And I honestly don't know what to make of them, but I noticed there's I think a Netflix film that is out right now that is, I've forgotten the name of it, but it's something like Quiet on Set or something, but it's it's an expose about the abuse of child actors in Hollywood. And the accusations against Sean Combs is that he was involved in sex trafficking. I do want to emphasize this is alleged, that he was involved in sex trafficking and things of this nature. And there's many more. I mean, long before Harvey Weinstein, but we're hearing more and more of this kind of stuff that relates to Jeffrey Epstein and on and on. Do you have any insight into how we're to think about these ideas? This is there fire where we're seeing the smoke, that in Hollywood, that pedophilia, human trafficking, these kind of things are mainstays, that they're the rule of the day?
Oh, well, I'm sure there's fire there. I personally, I did witness one. He's a very famous director. I'm not going to use his name, but he would show up at these parties, these gay parties, in a limousine. He's my age, and he would show up at these parties and with like 16-year-old boys as his dates. It was crazy. I mean, he's actually been kind of exposed about this. I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know where the legal battle is with this, but in general, though, with like Sean Combs, I don't know the details of that. And I just mean in general, because this is just one more instance of rumors that we're hearing about Hollywood sex trafficking, pedophilia, this kind of thing. He's just one more, and it may not be true. He may have no evidence to that, or his accusers may have no evidence of that. I don't know, but I'm just wondering what your knee jerk is to that. Yeah, I'm sure it's all over the place in Hollywood. I'm sure it exists. Trying to think if I've had friends who have. I mean, to some extent, I experienced it when I first got here. Just kind of like older, lecherous studio heads who, I'm sure it's rampant in Hollywood, and I mean, why wouldn't it be? And I mean, we're in Babylon here, so I'm sure it is. I don't know, a lot of specific details about it, but yeah, I think it's pretty true out here.
Well, it's something that we're hearing more and more, and I just haven't known what to make sense of it. Because I've never been in Hollywood, and I don't have any interaction with that crowd to really know. And these days, it's not just simply on the left that you see a lot of nonsense being spewed, but there are accounts, we both know this, on social media that purport to be conservative accounts that spew all kinds of stuff that is false information. In fact, incredibly false information, just to get the clicks. So in navigating some of these kind of questions, I've just wondered what to make of this. Tell you an interesting story, Beckett, and I hope one that's encouraging to the people in this audience. Maybe 20 years ago, maybe not that long, maybe it's been it probably has been 20 years ago. I was speaking at Bowdoin College in Maine, a very, kind of elite, very leftist institution. And I was there speaking to both Christian and atheist groups, and laid out my reasons for why I believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God and that he was bodily resurrected. And afterwards, almost, you were talking about how your conversation in that coffee shop was like a Christian's dream. It was like something that had to be a setup. Well, so is what I'm about to tell you, because it's something that's almost like a trope. It's so funny. But what I have learned to do when I speak in those kind of situations is I don't immediately go and engage the crowd at, say you're signing books or something like that. I try to grab a bottle of water or something and stand a little bit aside, because I have discovered that the real people, the people who have real questions, they're not going to approach you at the book table. They want to speak to you privately, and you have to give them that space. There's always people who want to show off for everybody else how clever they are and what they know and want to take you on. Those people want a public. Mm-hmm. But the people with real personal issues, that's not what they're looking for. They're embarrassed, they're hiding, they're afraid, they don't know what to do. And so here I am standing with my bottle of water, trying to keep a little distance as we're about to have refreshments and this kind of thing. And this young man comes over to me, and Beckett, it's so funny the way he began the conversation. He said, "Can you guess? I have a friend." And he says, I have a friend who's I have a friend who is struggling with homosexuality. Can he be a Christian? And I deliberately answered the question somewhat flippantly because I sort of wanted to jar him. And I said, yes, of course. And turned to someone else. And he goes, whoa. He can be a Christian? And I said, yeah, I mean, of course he can be a Christian. Yes, man. And he goes, wait. He said, but I thought that Christianity was against homosexuality. And I said, well, yes, that's true. The Bible speaks very strongly about homosexuality. It speaks very strongly about the nature of man and sin in general. I said, that's absolutely true, but your friend can become a Christian. And he's really struggling to process this. And he says, but I guess that means he needs to get his life together and become a heterosexual first and then become a Christian. And I'd love to say that I invented my response to him. I did not. I heard this when I was a kid, but I said to him, no, do you take a bath before you take a bath? And he looked at me strange and he said, thinking this must be a trick question. And I said, it's a simple question. Do you take a bath before you take a bath? And he said, well, no. Thinking again, there must be some trap door here. And I said, well, you don't get yourself cleaned up to come to Jesus. You come to Jesus to get cleaned up. And I could see, to me, to this day, Beckett, it is one of my favorite ministry moments because I could see the light of revelation come on with him in that moment. I'm not sure that when he was asking me about what it meant to become if his friend could become a Christian, if he actually understood what the gospel was, but in that moment, I could see that he did. Suddenly, he understood what it meant. And I said, brother, your friend, he doesn't get his life right to come to Jesus. He comes to Jesus to get his life right. And two of us are men. We are sinners. We have recognized our sinful natures, and we've come to Jesus Christ to clean us up. And we remain sinners, but we remain forgiven. And that has been bestowed upon us. His righteousness has been imputed to us. Beckett, I look forward to talking to you a lot more. I hope sometime. I don't know if I'm ever going to be out in LA because your governor is nuts.
I'm well aware of that. Yes. Yeah.
But if you should ever want to come east, we'd be delighted to host you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. I mean, I'm who knows? I mean, I'm speaking in different states around the country this year, but I mean, so far it hasn't been Alabama, but when it is, I'll contact you. I'll let you know.
Well, we'd be delighted to have you. I'm sure Ranger would greet you, my giant German Shepherd. We would all be glad to have you. Beckett Cook, who is the host of the Beckett Cook Show. He is the author of A Change of Affection, A Gay Man's Incredible Story of Redemption. Beckett, it's been awesome to have you on the show. Your story is so powerful, and I hope that it will resonate, reverberate with this audience and remind them that, I mean, if you're just merely a conservative, you're just as lost as anybody on the left. It's only through belief in Jesus Christ that our lives are changed and that we have any hope whatsoever. Do you agree with me in that, Beckett?
Amen to that. I agree. Yes.
Great to have you. Take care.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it.